What's up, everybody? Andre here, and this is the Tennis and Bagels podcast. Monte Carlo final just happened yesterday. Another one between Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz. Every single one of these matches seems to have just a lot of meaning for the season, for their careers, for the race for number one. It's just the narrative seems to be written perfectly, seems to be scripted from the very start it was born. Just take a look at this tweet from Bastien Fachan on Twitter. Um, Coming into Sunday, time on court this week, Carlos Alcaraz, 5 hours and 59 minutes. Jannik Sinner, 5 hours and 59 minutes. Weeks at number one, Carlos Alcaraz, 66 weeks. Jannik Sinner, 66 weeks. Points won in the rivalry, 1,651. 1,651 for both. And obviously, this tie just got broken. After the final, Jannik just made the 1,000 points and became the world number one. And now he's starting his 67th week. And Carlos Alcaraz lost a few points, obviously, from the title that he was defending. And while the match was not necessarily the best between the two of them, I feel like it was very nervy. I don't know exactly what was going on between them at that moment. Obviously, there was the wind that was playing a role. They were not quite exactly finding all of their shots. It was kind of weird in a sense, like you would watch them play incredible points, especially in the first set, and then right away just make an unforced error, just miss a return, miss a volley. It was just happening quite often. So it wasn't the best quality of match between the two of them. Alcaraz obviously led by a break in both sets and couldn't hold on to it. Probably should have taken the first set, really. In the second set, it was disappointing that he wasn't able to, raise his level a little bit further. And I think Jannik won 4 straight games from 3-2 down to win the match 6-3. So it wasn't definitely their best showing. But I think it's really still a really important point in the rivalry, really, and specifically in the short term for the French Open narrative. The clay is where Sinner, he hadn't yet won a big title on clay yet. And it's pretty important that he does so. Beating Alcaraz, is now on a roll in the Masters 1000 events, has won 4 straight, starting on Paris last year, and then obviously the Sunshine Double, and then Monte Carlo, and all of that. He just dropped 1 set, which is absolutely insane. And Carlos is probably lagging a little bit behind right now. He's won 2 titles this year, obviously the Australian Open to complete the career Grand Slam, and Doha, where Jannik lost, not inexplicably, but he was kind of like on a down slope on confidence wise, losing to Menchik, which he then overcome obviously to win Indian Wells in Miami. And so the first point here is that the narrative right now is just between Sinner and Alcaraz. Point. There was never really any doubt that it was that, but Zverev just keeps coming and just keeps reaching semifinals, and he says, "I'm ready to win a major this year." But for now, the data points are clear. There's just Sinner, there's just Alcaraz, and after them is just the best of the rest. They're dominating the tour, and the rest is doing their best to kind of keep up with them and take the points that they're able to and win the tournaments that they're able to. But right now, there's no challenger. They're dominating, and there's nobody who's really challenging their dominance in any way, shape, or form. Even in the Masters 1000, there's hardly ever been a tournament where both Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz played that neither one of them won. So if they both were in the draw, one of them ended up winning most of the time. So yeah, and this fight is between Zverev and Djokovic right now, and I'm going to get to them a little bit later. But let's explore a little bit of what it means for the Monte Carlo final and the fact that Sinner won towards the rest of the clay season, and even a little bit I've had in terms at going into the grass season. If I want to extrapolate a bit of the narrative, obviously a lot of things are still to happen in the meantime. So I think for Sinner is obviously the perfect start for the clay season. It's a title. If he only started with the title, it would have been pretty good. But I would say starting with the title and beating Alcaraz in that final, I think it couldn't be better for him. You could even start arguing that Sinner was maybe developing a bit of a mental block against Alcaraz, having lost the French Open last year. Hadn't really beat Carlos in any big finals before here, so this was definitely a very important stepping stone for him, especially going into the French Open and probably a little bit even earlier at Rome, where he's going to be facing all of the pressure from obviously being world number one, an Italian. He wasn't able to convert last year when he reached the final and obviously lost to Alcaraz, but he was also coming off of his ban break that he was forced to take, obviously. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens from now on. And so, what do I think is going to happen next? Obviously, Sinner is not playing in Barcelona. Carlos is scheduled to play, but I don't know if Sinner even is planning to play in Madrid. I think he might even skip it again, like he did last year. He obviously has no points to defend, so it's not really going to hurt him to not play in terms of the world number one, of course. And he wants to win Rome. That's the tournament that he really wants to win. Probably just as much as he wants to win the French Open. And winning that, I think, is probably going to, just completely boost his confidence. Is going to be even more of an unreal player at Roland Garros if he does end up winning there. In terms of the number one battle, it makes sense. I think he wanting to win in Rome. He only has the final points to defend is 650. Carlos has 1,000. So I think that's where he's going to be at. I think he's going to skip Madrid, play Rome, and just go for the win at Roland Garros, which is the absolute goal for both of them, really. But Carlos, what is his schedule going to look like? I think he might still skip Barcelona. I think it's not really a great idea for him to play there unless he plans to skip Madrid, maybe. I think it's just way too much tennis for him to play Monte Carlo and then Barcelona and then Madrid and Rome. This is 6 weeks of tennis because, of course, Madrid and Rome are both held in 2 weeks. He's going to have some time between all of them, but it's still a lot of time to play tennis. And, it's more chances to, I guess, lose a big match. Like he lost to Rune last year in Barcelona. He was nursing a bit of an injury, which was able to heal before playing in Rome and the French Open. But if he's thinking of maybe regaining the world number one or even putting more pressure onto Sinner, I think playing Madrid is the better option. It's obviously different conditions. Madrid plays a lot faster and whatnot, but it could even be good practice for him to play again on a fast-ish clay because Sinner speeds up the pace quite a bit. So if he's able to just deal with big hitters and deal with like a faster pace, maybe he's gonna come into Rome and probably is going to not beat Sinner, but probably is going to face Sinner in the final. That's what would be my guess. I think that they both they wanted this way too badly to end up losing early in the tournament. So I think that we're probably going to see another Alcaraz final in Rome. So yeah, I think in terms of world number one battle and preparation for Roland Garros, I don't think it makes sense for Alcaraz to play all of the clay court tournaments. Obviously, he's going to skip the week before the French Open, which is, I believe, Hamburg. But that's just too much tennis. There was a point in Nadal's career that I remember that he decided to skip Barcelona, and then he preferred to play just the Masters, and he ended up winning all of them. He won Monte Carlo, Madrid, Rome, and the French Open. I think it wouldn't be a terrible idea for Carlos if he decided to do the same here. So yeah, we'll wait and see. He hasn't made any announcements yet, so it's still up in the air. He might still decide to play. Barcelona is still an important tournament for him, but I feel like in terms of points, there's definitely a lot more to gain if he plays in Madrid, and it's definitely a lot better if he gets a little bit more rested after it was a rough week. It was an intense week in Monte Carlo. Obviously he didn't play his best tennis all throughout, and it's just accumulated fatigue is definitely an issue that he doesn't want to run into when he gets to Roland Garros. Oh, and I just remember that actually Sinner did say in a press conference, he didn't necessarily say that he was going to skip Madrid, but he left it pretty clear that his goal was to stay healthy for Rome and the French Open. He didn't explicitly say anything about Madrid, but because he left it out so, intentionally, it does leave you to wonder, well, he's probably not going to put that in his schedule because the goal is to win Roland Garros, and it's the goal for the both of them. The goal to the French Open, I think, is just going to be so important for them this year, even more so than last year, especially because right now the battle for number one has really heated up, and Carlos has done something impressive in Australia by winning and completing the career Grand Slam, which puts Sinner behind. And I don't think Sinner wants to be behind in terms of accomplishments. There's something that he can achieve right away. And so here's what's at stake right now at Roland Garros. First, for Sinner, winning Roland Garros, he also completes the career Grand Slam, which, as we know, he was basically 1 point away from doing last year. If he had won Roland Garros, he obviously, who knows, he would have won Wimbledon, but he could have all of them right now on him. But he didn't. Carlos mounted the crazy comeback and, ended up taking the Roland Garros title and then winning Australia this year. He completes the career Grand Slam. And Sinner has the opportunity to do that this year. I think it's obviously his number one goal to have that. Second, for him to win a major is very important because confidence-wise, if he doesn't win a major yet, it doesn't really matter how many Masters he's winning. Like if he's trailing behind the majors, especially if Carlos wins, which is the guess, right? If it's really hard to imagine anyone other than Carlos or Jannik winning a major, let alone being number one, obviously. But yeah, so if Sinner doesn't go on to win Roland Garros and then Carlos does, especially if Carlos beats him in the final, even if Jannik is still number one by that point, it will not feel like Sinner is number one. And I think this is probably going to take a bit of a dent on him. It's going to put a lot of pressure on him. And going into Wimbledon, Carlos is probably going to be playing a lot more free because of that. And, it all goes back to maybe that press conference from Serena Williams when she says, well, Dinara Safina is world number one and she won Rome and Madrid, right? So of course she's the best. Like she had a bit of a tone of sarcasm in that one, or it sounded like that because at that point Serena was the big major champion. She was the big force on tour, but she was just not number one. And that's how it's going to feel for Sinner if it doesn't win Roland Garros. And if Sinner goes on to win actually the French Open, because as I said, if Carlos wins, he's going to have a lot more pressure at Wimbledon. If he wins, then he's going to be the obviously undisputed world number one, right? He's going to have won the first 3 Masters 1000s of the year. If he does decide to play in Rome and wins, he will have Rome as well. He's going to have 4 and a Grand Slam. So that is obviously the title tally is better than Alcaraz at this point if he does win the French Open. And he can go on to Wimbledon as the undisputed world number one. Not sure how much pressure is going to be affecting him at that point. I think he's going to be just loaded up on confidence. And it's going to be a really important part of the season, right? Because at that point, if you're number one and you win the Grand Slam, well, the second major of the year, if he ends up going to the Channel Slam as well, which he hasn't accomplished yet, it's going to feel a lot more like Federer probably did or Djokovic did when they were dominating the tour. It's just they're the favorite, they're the number one. It's not necessarily about the number anymore. It's more so about the actual feeling of being number one, the aura of being number one, which Sinner really gave off a lot of it back in 2024. So at this point, I think it would be really important. And he would probably have a lot more confidence as well playing against Alcaraz, especially if he wins the French Open, beating Alcaraz again in the final. I think that's going to be a massive boost in confidence for him. It's just going to feel completely unbeatable. And Carlos, on the other hand, could feel a little bit more shaken up by that. So it would be difficult for him to go on and defend the rest of the titles that he has towards the end of the year. And is also going to give Sinner a huge boost in terms of points for the year-end number one race, for which obviously he has a lot of points to defend in Paris and Vienna and the ATP finals. But that's really a long time from now. So we'll leave that for when it comes. And for Carlos, I also said that, there's a lot of confidence issues going on. Not issues, but there could be issues arising from losing at the French Open. So for him, it's pretty important, I would say, for him to win. I think they both are at the same kind of level of confidence right now. I don't think Carlos is feeling like just losing the one final in Monte Carlo is just going to make him feel like his second favorite for Roland Garros. I think he still feels pretty much like he's the favorite as a 2-time defending champion, career Grand Slam champion this year in Australian Open. There's still a lot of tournaments coming up, so he's still got a lot of time to make up for that loss and just work on whatever he needs to work on. And again, if Carlos wins the French Open, it will definitely stop Sinner from having that confidence boost as I mentioned. And even if he ends up being number 2, he will be feeling like the world number 1. He'll be going into Wimbledon, and at that point, for which he has only the final points to defend, I guess only quotation marks, he will still feel like he's the favorite again for that title. He's 2-time champion at Wimbledon, has made 3 finals in a row. Of course, losing last year to Sinner. And if he's not number 1 by then, there's a good chance that if he wins the French Open and goes on to win Wimbledon, he could get back the world number 1 ranking. Right now, it's not a huge difference. I think it's about 400 points that they have between them, or 500 points, which is it's pretty much nothing. So even if the rankings are not Carlos 1 and Jannik 2, I think by the time that he gets to Wimbledon, he could be number 1 again. And he will be really, if he wins the French Open, going into Wimbledon, if he becomes world number 1 right then, it's just going to be a mere question of mathematics, because at that point, with the French Open in his hands and Australian Open, he will be regarded as world number 1. As I said, like, doesn't matter how many Masters Sinner has. So yeah, and he's got a bunch of points to defend after this. So this whole section of the year, there's just so much tennis happening that you can't really afford to have dips in your confidence that'll last way too long, right? So for them both, is really important that they make a good showing, and they'll be going for the win. It's going to be an epic battle, I think, for the French Open. And the last point in terms of the goal for the French Open is that nobody is going to be talking about it right now, but we're getting to that inflection point where, should Carlos win, he's going to be halfway done with the calendar Grand Slam. And he's the US Open reigning champion, and he's a 2-time Wimbledon champion. So it makes a lot of sense that he'd be able to do it. Like, if he can win Wimbledon and the French Open, all eyes are going to be on him. Of course, it's probably going to be so much pressure that Sinner would be able to capitalize on this, but it would be the talk of the town, really, if Alcaraz ends up winning the French Open. I don't think that there's going to be anybody who will not be mentioning this anymore. I think at that point, it just kind of unlocks the situation, unlocks the story. Is Carlos going to complete the career Grand Slam? And that's another thing that Sinner does not want, right? In terms of, just trying to reassess his own confidence and his own, claim at the world number 1, to have not only lost the French Open, having his biggest rival being halfway there to the calendar Grand Slam right after he completes his own career Grand Slam. He's gonna have a lot of ground to make up for if he doesn't win the French Open, or especially if Carlos wins the French Open. If they both lose, then I guess it's a whole different story, and all I'm saying right now is just for not. But sticking to the point of the rivalry, which I think at this point, I think it's just between them two. I think, again, it's pretty wild to have anybody else winning this aside from them two. But then again, as I said, there's a lot of tennis to be played, and at this time of the year, it's a lot of managing confidence and health and match fitness, which is a really, really tough balance to strike. And that's why I really think that Barcelona should be off Alcaraz's schedule, because I would say it's, unless he wants to skip Madrid again, which at which point, and he's probably prioritizing conditions and playing on a clay that really resembles more Roland Garros, so that he's ready to get there, instead of playing a full month of tennis, which would be Madrid and Rome, and then going off to Roland Garros. So yeah, it'll be a lot of wait and see this week. I think is going to be really important if Carlos decides to play or not, because at that point we're going to be looking at Madrid. Is he going to decide to play or not? And then if he does decide to play, we are going to start having questions. Is he really going to be healthy enough to play at the French Open? injury free and completely ready, because Sinner is definitely going to be ready, at least like physically. He hasn't shown any signs of injury, and if he doesn't show any, the way he's managing his schedule, I think is going to be extremely fit for the French Open. And I do think that if there is one major that Sinner wants to win this year, it would be the French Open. Um, all things being equal, if even if Alcaraz hadn't won the Australian Open, even if Sinner or Alcaraz hadn't won the Australian Open, I would still say that probably French Open would be the one major that Sinner wants to win, because it's the one that is missing, right? So there you have it. The goal between those two, the rivalry as it develops, the narrative is really reaching the point where it really is at each major, and then we look at the world number one, and then at each major, and then we look at the world number one again, and then Masters, and then we look at the world number one, because it's just going to be this back and forth. They're going to be trading, and as I read from the tweet, they're extremely close. So it's who gets the edge on the rivalry, if anybody is able to get an edge on the rivalry. Is Carlos going to maintain his edge in the rivalry? Because right now he's been winning more, has been a little bit more comfortable, especially beating Sinner from positions where he should be losing. So will Sinner be able to revert this? Is it going to be a huge change, a seismic change in between the way that these two play each other? So yeah, there's a lot of questions that we want to see answered, and we might really have to wait for the French Open for that, because I don't think Rome is gonna give us much more data points on that one anymore, because Monte Carlo was a really good point for Sinner to beat Carlos, to get to a number one, to make sure that he is able to, play Carlos well on clay and beat him in a big final. And then Rome is going to be a different beast for him because it's at home. And then after this, in terms of confidence, I think he's already gathered enough to be able to, go into the French Open with the mind that he can beat Carlos, unless of course he goes to Rome and they're both fully fit, and then Carlos breadsticks and bagels him. That is going to be really weird to see. I don't think it's going to happen. So because it is completely, unlikely scenario, I'm just basically discarding it from all of my narrative predictions for this season. All right, so since we've talked about the best of the best, now we can talk about a little bit of the rest, because as I said, there are just Carlos and Sinner doing their own thing at the top and winning the big titles and challenging each other for number one, and then there's the rest of the people who are trying to figure themselves out on tour and figuring out ways to beat each other, and if they get the chance to face Carlos Alcaraz and Sinner. And I think the biggest story of Monte Carlo has to be, well, after obviously world number one and Sinner beating Alcaraz on clay, is Valentin Vacherot, right? So Vacherot is obviously Monegasque. He's from Monte Carlo. He's won Shanghai last year, rised up in the rankings, and came in from qualifiers and won Shanghai, which is his only title so far to date. I believe he's even only reached the semifinals at 1,000 level. So this might be his second 1,000, his second semifinal overall on tour. He's up to number 17 in the world. He wasn't seeded at Monte Carlo, and he ended up getting some really good wins, especially the win against Deminor and obviously Musetti. Like, got 2 top 10 wins in that run. And confession time, I really didn't think that after Shanghai we would see much of Vacherot. I thought that he was going to be one of those wonders that wins a big title and then doesn't really know how to follow it up, and then he's going to start losing in a few big matches, or because when you win big titles, people take notice of you and they have data points. They're able to go back and watch your matches and see why you're able to beat the big guys and the big challengers. So people will be ready for him, and I didn't know if he was going to be ready for people being ready for him. But I'm pleasantly wrong about that prediction. He's been really good to watch. I'm even become a bit of a fan of him. I think he's really fun to watch. I think he really brings in the crowd and brings in the energy. And he also really thrives when he's in the pressure moments. So he was behind a few times in the scoreboard, and he was able to bring the crowd back in, and he was able to save a bunch of break points against Deminor. He was left 40 at some point, and in the third set, and he was just able to keep his focus and bring his serve in. Was able to play some phenomenal shots, and it was just really fun to watch him. And even if he doesn't go on to win another 1,000, I think he'll be a really super good addition to the top 10 if he's able to maintain this level, keep himself fit. There was no really any injury scare for him so far that I really know of, even off court from other tournaments. And he obviously wanted to do well in Monte Carlo, so that was that extra, incentive and pressure at the same time. But he did super well. He played Alcaraz, lost 6-4, 6-4, but it was a great match. I think he had chances that he could have played a little bit better, but it's Alcaraz. He played obviously some phenomenal tennis at times. And Vacherot is probably maybe even getting a little bit more tired, more fatigued from previous matches. And yeah, he was never a favorite to beat Carlos, let alone even the tournament itself. But it was great to see him, and I really expect to see more of him. I'll be looking at his next tournament and seeing how he does. We can even infer that because he won Shanghai last year, he's really good on clay. He's really good on hard. I think he's got a pretty transferable game. I think we can expect him to do well in other tournaments as well, and not necessarily just a few here and there or just Monte Carlo. So, well, at the very minimum, that's what I hope. I think he's got good top 10 potential as well. And if he makes it to the top 10, I think it's going to be really cool. I think if he rises in confidence and he feels like he belongs, which for me, that's kind of like the feeling that I get. I feel like he obviously has still a little bit of an underground energy to him, not underground, but underdog energy to him. But if he is able to, relish on those moments, and I feel like he really enjoys playing in front of the big crowds. If he's able to maintain that and feel like he belongs in the elite of tennis, it will be really sweet to have in a top 10. So yeah, another story that just happened to have happened was that João Fonseca was able to play world's number 1, 2, and 3 in the first 3 Masters of the year, and that's pretty good. That was the closest one that he got to a win. I think it's the first one that he could even expect a win, if I can say that. I would still probably say like people would have rated Zverev some like 80-20 to win this match, and he did. He was in a pretty tough one though. Like it was in 3 sets. It's 7-5, 6-7, 6-3 in the final score. So yeah, I think João Fonseca is just grabbing a ton of good experience on tour. I think he might be feeling like he should even have won that match, or at least made it a little bit closer in the third set. But it's good to see that he's pushing himself and trying to learn and making changes even mid-match, try and overcome certain challenges. But that's pretty much all I have to say right now. It's been a really good curve. He's up to number 35 in the world, back into the top 40. Let's see if he's able to gain a little bit more ranking points so that he can be seeded for the French Open. But it's a wait and see situation. We'll see how that goes for him. I also wanted to say a word about Medvedev because it was so weird. He got double bageled by Berrettini. He obviously decided to play in Monte Carlo because it's a non-mandatory clay tournament. I don't know exactly what was his goal. Maybe he just thought, well, I can probably win a couple matches and gather some points and solidify my position in the top 10. But I don't know. I think he's probably has off court. He probably tells himself, I really want to overcome my hate of clay. I can play well there. I have a game that is more or less suitable because he's a really good defender. And he's won titles before on clay. He's won Roland before, and he also has reached the semifinals in Monte Carlo and the quarterfinals at the French Open. So he's not terrible on clay. He has really good results. But I think that whenever he gets there, Medvedev just hates bad bounces so badly. It just gets completely under his skin, and he's not able to do anything. So it will be. I don't even know if there's any expectations to have of him during the clay season. I don't even know if he even is able to maintain himself into the top 10 for the entire time. I think it's just probably going to be one of those seasons where Medvedev just completely goes unnoticed for a while, and then we go back to hard courts again. It's sad because he was playing so well. He played well at Indian Wells, which is slightly faster than normal, but it's still slower hard courts than the other ones. So I thought maybe we are going to be seeing a Medvedev that has a different mentality, a different approach to the game. But who knows? Something happened in that match. He wasn't his best, and at that point, we probably can expect him to lose pretty much every match that he plays on clay, at least for this season, unless something different happens and he proves everybody wrong. So yeah, what's gonna happen to Medvedev? Your guess is as good as anyone's, probably even his. And because I'm Canadian, I definitely want to talk a little bit. It's been a while that I haven't mentioned Canadian players in here. FAA, Felix Auger-Aliassime played Sinner, right? He played Sinner in Monte Carlo in the quarterfinals. He obviously got beaten pretty badly, and well, not that badly. It was an okay match, but indulge with this thought with me for just a little bit. I think he's got something almost figured out in his game. I don't know exactly why or how I think this, but he's up to world number 5 right now. Again, his career best. And he was obviously expected to lose against Sinner. But I do think that he's been hitting his backhand at least solid enough that he can stay in rallies for a little bit. His forehand was interestingly the shot that broke more often for him, as he was trying to like run away from his backhand, but he was holding it up really well on the cross court against Sinner. Sinner was probably not really trying all that hard to, push him all that much. He was really keeping the ball in that corner without necessarily trying to hit winners or trying to push him way too much. He doesn't need to do that. Felix's backhand is not that great. You can expect it to break, or you can expect him to try and run around it so that it opens up the down line, which Sinner ended up doing quite often. But I think that Felix, if he can keep at least that solid, backhand, and he's able to defend his serve a little bit better, and he cleans up a little bit of the errors on his forehand, he has a game that he's able to at least keep himself alive in those matches. He took a set off of Sinner and the US Open last year. So I think he's got something going. I think he's understanding his game a little bit better. He's understanding the role of his backhand and how he can use it. So I think that he is on the verge of figuring something out, at the very minimum, challenge them in the same level that, say, for example, a Joe Furtsanga challenged Federer and Nadal and Djokovic back in his days. Because sometimes all it takes is them winning one match, and then it opens up, the draw, or, you stay alive to play whoever's in front of you. If he's able to take at least one of Sinner and Alcaraz in one match, maybe the rest of the tournament is not going to have the other. So it's important, and I think that he is probably one of these guys that is able to be one of those top 10s that is always tough to have in his draw. Right now, I don't think that he's quite at that position, but I think he's on the verge of figuring that out, and I'm really excited for him to figure this out. I really want him to do it because, back to this best of the rest situation, sometimes it's a little boring to see Sinner and Alcaraz just plowing through the draw, and we're just waiting for him to be like, well, let's just wait until the final. Like, there's no point in an entire tournament if that's the case. We're just watching matches to gauge whether they are playing well or not, so that we can see how well they're going to play against each other in the final. Kind of lame, right? So yeah, Felix, I think is a good bet for him to be one of those guys that is never a good player to have in your side of the draw. So he needs to figure himself out first a little. So we'll wait and see. And now that I will want to keep talking much about Zverev, I've already made an entire video about him why I don't think he can win majors. But it was a really, don't want to say strange, but almost sad performance. He was so defeated against Sinner. It was 6-1, 6-4, 6-4, 6-1. It was just not great, right? He reached the semifinals of every big tournament this year so far. I think we can even keep expecting that to happen. If neither Alcaraz or Sinner decides to play in Madrid, he's the heavy favorite because he's able to beat everybody that's below him, but just has absolutely zero chance and zero confidence in him to beat Sinner and Alcaraz. There's just really not much to say about it. It's just what are we going to expect from Zverev for this season? The diagnostic still stands that he needs to prove himself against these two, and that is all there is to it. Like, it doesn't matter how many analysis we do week in and week out, as long as he doesn't show up against Sinner and Alcaraz and beats at least one of them, I think the conclusion is going to remain the same. And that's about it. There's not really much to say about Zverev at this point anymore. And the last player that I wanted to mention was very much under the radar player, right? So we got Alexander Blockx. I think that's how you say his name. He's 21 years old, played in the Next Gen finals. I think it was last year. Yeah, it was last year. He's got a pretty well-rounded game. He's got some good results. This year, he won a challenger at 125, reached the final at another. Both were on hard, but he played well at Monte Carlo. He reached the third round. He reached the third round after going through qualifying, and he lost in a pretty solid match against Alex de Minaur. He is a player that I think has all the tools to compete and beat the big guys as well, to be a tough one in his good days. So it really is not so much of an analysis here, but just a player that I think we can keep in our radar. Just like keep an eye on him. Like, where is he in the draw? He's up to number 70 in the world right now, so he will be able to get through and play some tournaments without needing to go through qualifying. Especially obviously the majors. I think he was already there for a while now, but still, it will be interesting to keep him just in the back of my mind, just seeing like, wherever he is in the draw, and like seeing what results is gonna produce from now on. So that's about it. And this is essentially the Monte Carlo review. Just to recap, I think Alcaraz should skip Barcelona. I think he should play Madrid. I think Sinner is not going to play either of those. Is just going to go for Rome. And the French Open is where it's at. And I think this is going to decide a lot of the narrative for the rest of the season after that. So, yeah. But still lots of tennis to be played, lots of tennis to be watched, lots of videos to be made. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. See ya.